At this point, the situation is clear. Iran is almost crushed. The US didn't just attack, they destroyed a large part of Iran's military system. Many bases, equipment, defenses, and command systems can no longer be fixed or completely destroyed. Even their leadership has been affected. Now, it's no longer just about attacks from above. Something bigger could happen. The US might even move in on the ground next. And if that happens, one unit is always mentioned: Delta Force. This is the elite special operations unit of the US, and they're used for missions that are dangerous, fast, and require precise action. The possible target is Iran's enriched uranium. This is one of the most sensitive parts of the conflict because it can be used to make nuclear weapons. That's why the current plan is not just to destroy these places, but to actually take the uranium itself. Direct, fast, and definitely controlled. But before we continue, please like this video. This means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. But before that happens, it's clear why the situation reached this point. This is no longer the Iran we used to know. Their military is almost just a shadow of its former strength. There are daily airstrikes and relentless attacks. While they barely have enough defenses left to stop this, they have lost a lot. One of the biggest blows was the loss of their former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, during the very first wave of strikes. After this, the loss of key leaders followed one after another. Because of this, their military lost clear direction and decision-making became chaotic. In total, more than 1,100 military personnel. The US, on the other hand, was able to fly more than 6,500 combat missions and hit over 7,000 targets. When Israel is included, this reaches almost 15,000 targets. At sea, more than 100 naval vessels were damaged or completely destroyed, along with missile launch sites, drone systems, and other important equipment. This means it's not just a simple attack. It's a broad dismantling of Iran's ability to fight. And what's more serious is that this was done by the US, using air power that Iran can no longer match. But this might not be the last step. What happened seems like preparation for the next move. And if this continues, the next one will be more direct and more dangerous because it won't come from above anymore, but from the ground. When that happens, the course of the battle will change. It will no longer be just an air campaign, but an operation that is fast, silent, and precise. And in this kind of mission, you need the right information, perfect timing, and no mistakes. For now, the situation is clear. The defenses are destroyed, the leadership is in disarray, and the way is open for the next step. The only question now is how far this will go. At this point, it's clear that the US's plan isn't over yet. What happened in the skies and at sea seems to be just the beginning of a bigger operation. It's not just the military that's the target now. What's more important is Iran's enriched uranium, something the US has long wanted to control. This is important because it's the basis for nuclear weapons. According to reports, Iran has more than 400 kilos of uranium enriched to 60%. The problem is, from that level, it only takes a little more processing to become weapons grade. This means it's close to the point where it can be used to make a nuclear weapon. Because of this, it's not enough for the US to just destroy the facilities. They need to seize or secure the uranium itself. This is where the possibility of a ground operation comes in. And for this kind of mission, the most suitable unit is Delta Force. They are used in operations that are dangerous, fast, and require precise movements. This kind of mission is not just a simple in-and-out operation. You need to know the exact location of the target. These are underground and still protected. Even though Iran's military is already weak, there is still security in these places. You need to move extremely fast, and there's no room for mistakes. If you make a mistake, the unit could get trapped or the situation could get worse. The US can't do this alone either. Coordination with Israel and other allies is necessary. There's a basis for why this is possible because of previous operations, where special forces were able to enter the target sites. They were underground and got out in a short amount of time. This shows that they can do it, but it doesn't mean it's easy. For the U.S., the reason why they would do this is clear. They don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Even though some facilities were hit before, the program still wasn't completely stopped. There are still some left, and as long as there's uranium, there's still a possibility. At this point, the direction of the fight is changing. It's no longer just about attacking and destroying. The goal is to completely remove Iran's ability to make a nuclear weapon. Once the uranium is obtained or secured, the biggest threat will be gone and the fight can end. But if it doesn't succeed, there's a possibility that the situation could get worse. Because even though Iran's military is weak and their leadership is in chaos, they still possess something important. This is their nuclear capability. So for now, even if the fight seems under control on the surface, there's a more dangerous part that could start underneath. This is the next part that could determine how the whole situation will end. In the midst of chaos and tension, a statement came out that seemed to offer a bit of hope, but when examined closely, it's not enough. On March 15, Abbas Araghchi said that they are ready to lower the level of enriched uranium.
Sa unang tingin, parang malaking...
And it seems like Iran is moving away from making a nuclear weapon, but the truth is this isn't a permanent solution. Lowering the enrichment level can also be reversed. When it's lowered, it can also be raised again at any time. This means the capability doesn't go away. It's only being weakened temporarily. This becomes clearer when you look at the data. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, even before the earlier strikes, Iran already had more than 400 kilograms.
Ng uranium na nasa 60%.
This level is not far from what's needed for a nuclear weapon, so it's clear that they're close to reaching that point. And it's not just about uranium here. Even if they lower the level, the machines used to increase it are still there. The knowledge of their scientists and the equipment needed to make a nuclear weapon. This means they still have the full capability. Even if one part is lost, they can still rebuild it. Because of this, the U.S. does not trust this kind of promise. For them, if everything is just left to Iran, there's a possibility that they could restart the program at any time. With just one order, it could go back to how it was before. That's why words or agreements are not enough. What they want is to make sure the capability is either fully controlled or completely eliminated. This is where the possibility of more direct action comes in. Not just airstrikes or pressure, but actual ground intervention. And for this kind of operation, the most suitable unit is the Delta Force. Because they're used for missions that require speed, stealth, and precision. But before this can happen, there's a big problem. It's not as simple as just going to a place and taking the uranium. The question is where it really is. There are known places like Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, but the situation isn't that simple. These places are large, underground, and have many tunnels. Some of them have also been damaged by previous strikes. That's why it has become even more difficult to pinpoint the exact location. It's also possible that the uranium has already been moved, hidden somewhere else, or divided into different storage locations to make it harder to find. That means if there's going to be an operation, it won't be as simple as going in and taking it. It will be a search inside a dangerous place where a fight could break out at any moment. While searching for the target, there could be resistance, a sudden attack, or remaining defenses. Even though Iran is already weakened, they still haven't lost their ability to fight. At this point, the situation is clear. On the surface, it seems like the U.S. already has control of the fight. But underneath, there is still the most important part left, the enriched uranium. And as long as this isn't controlled, the fight isn't over yet. Because of this, the direction of the operation is gradually changing. From attacking from a distance, it's shifting to closer and more dangerous moves. And when that happens, it's no longer a simple war watched from afar, but a fight that's more personal, faster, and with higher risk. Now imagine if Delta Force actually finds what they're looking for. The problem doesn't end there. That's just where the harder part of the operation begins. It's not enough to just find the target. They need to capture it and maintain control of the area. For example, Isfahan. This place is inside Iran and far from the sea. It can be reached using helicopters from U.S. ships, but it's not a simple trip. They need to refuel while in the air. The timing of the entry is planned, and there is definitely backup in case something unexpected happens. Every move has to be precise. Once they've entered and secured the site, a bigger problem arises. A small team isn't enough to guard the area. Additional forces are needed to make sure the enemy can't take it back. This means the operation will get bigger and more soldiers will need to go in. One possible step is to capture an airfield near the target. For example, the Badr Air Base near Isfahan. Once it's captured, it will be easier for forces to get in and out. But in exchange, it will require a larger deployment of troops and a more complicated operation. At this point, it's no longer a simple special operation. To secure a nuclear site, a large number of soldiers are needed to guard the perimeter. Continuous support from the air and constant monitoring of the surroundings are needed. And if more than one site is targeted, the scope becomes even bigger. Given the scale required, this could possibly become one of the largest operations of its kind. It's not just about a single unit. Many parts need to move simultaneously. This includes special teams trained to handle radioactive materials. This isn't just a mission for soldiers. It also requires experts who can secure, transport, and handle uranium safely. If the plan goes well, it should be easy to follow. The special forces will enter, take control of the area, retrieve the uranium, destroy any remaining equipment, and leave immediately. On paper, the process looks straightforward, but in reality, the risk is extremely high. While doing this, there's a possibility of a counterattack, ongoing attacks from the sky, and they're inside enemy territory. Time is also limited because they can't stay inside for long. Just one mistake could lead to consequences. With the whole team trapped, this is the reality of this kind of operation. It's not just a simple retrieval of something. This is a direct entry into a country while there's active fighting, just to retrieve the most sensitive asset. When the U.S. tries this, there's no turning back. Because once this kind of move starts, it's no longer just an attack from a distance. This is the most dangerous part of the fight. This is the most dangerous part of the fight. This is war. Delta Force alone isn't enough for this kind of operation. In fact, they're just the first step. Once they've secured the target, a larger force is needed right away to make sure it can't be taken back. To secure a nuclear site, combat troops like Army Rangers and other units will move in. Their job is to guard the area, make sure no one gets close, and protect the entire operation. This is the most dangerous part. The fight doesn't end there. You need to hold and defend it. The battle won't just happen on the ground. Because the sites have already been bombed, there's a high possibility that the entrances are damaged. Debris is blocking the way, and some parts of the tunnels have collapsed. That's why engineers and heavy equipment are needed to open the way inside. It's not as simple as just going in. It still needs to be fixed before it can be used. There's an even more dangerous problem. They won't just be dealing with damaged buildings. There could also be hidden explosives like landmines and other traps. Experts are needed to check and clear these so that the soldiers can move safely. Once the uranium is obtained, it can't just be taken out carelessly. It needs to be transported properly and safely. The most practical way is by using an airplane. This means they need to secure or build an airstrip to transport the nuclear materials out. This is where the operation becomes even more complicated, because they need to control an area while preparing for the extraction. While doing all of this, the forces remain in one place. This means they become easier targets. Even though Iran is already weakened, they still have some capabilities left. Even if the use of missiles and drones has decreased, it hasn't completely disappeared. Because of this, a strong defense above is still needed. Ground-based air defense is needed, fighter jets patrolling above, and continuous monitoring to protect the soldiers. As the operation goes on, the risk of attack increases, and the additional dangers from radiation and accidents also grow. While handling uranium, special teams trained to handle this kind of material are needed to avoid greater danger. Despite all of this, it's clear why the U.S. is still willing to take this step. They don't want to let Iran keep its nuclear capability. As long as something remains, there's a possibility that the problem will return. At this point, it's no longer just about airstrikes or destroying the military. The real goal is to control the most dangerous part of the conflict and make sure it doesn't happen again. When you attempt this kind of operation, it's the riskiest part of the entire conflict. Strength alone is no longer enough. Your movements need to be precise, execution must be quick, and there's no room for mistakes. A single error could change the entire course of the situation. There's a clear sign now that the U.S. is shifting its approach. The troops are on their way. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit is coming from the Indo-Pacific and is now heading to the Middle East. It has around 2,200 Marines and is expected to arrive before the end of March. This is not a small deployment, and there is one important detail. This is not Delta Force. That means this is not for the elite. This is a deep operation inside Iran, and it's not to seize nuclear sites. If the target isn't nuclear, it's clear that the focus is the Strait of Hormuz. This is the place where a large portion of the world's oil passes through and where the attacks on ships originate. What the 31st MEU could possibly do is carry out a rapid attack on the coastal areas of Iran. Their targets are the places used for attacks at sea. This is not an invasion of the whole country, but a limited operation with a clear objective. Even before the Marines arrive, the U.S. is already taking action. They are already dropping powerful bombs on missile sites near the coast. This is done to eliminate the threat before the troops go in. If this isn't done, the soldiers will become easy targets while they're on the ground. Looking deeper, the U.S. is gradually clearing the coastal defenses to make it safer. Once they're in, the next step could be to take control of strategic locations like ports. Once these are secured, they can serve as bases to control movement at sea, prevent attacks by small boats, and protect passing ships. But even if these places are secured, there's still a risk. If the troops stay in one place, they can still be hit by missiles or drones. That's why the initial attacks are important. These aren't just simple strikes, but preparations to reduce the danger before the ground operation even begins. Right now, it's clear that the U.S. has two possible courses of action. The first is to use special forces to seize the nuclear assets. The second is to use the Marines to control the Strait of Hormuz. The methods are different, the targets are different, but the goal is the same: to remove Iran's ability to pose a threat. If their nuclear capability is gone, the greatest danger will disappear. If the Strait of Hormuz is controlled, they will lose their ability to affect the oil supply. If these two things happen, Iran will have almost no way left to fight back. At this point, it's no longer just about airstrikes or pressure. This is the part where there is movement on the ground and a direct effect on the whole world. And as the Marines get closer, only one thing becomes clear. The fight is heading towards a closer, more direct, and more dangerous phase, where every move has an immediate consequence. At this point, there's another thing that's not often noticed, but has a big impact on the fight. This is logistics, or how the forces move and are supported. It's not enough to just have weapons and soldiers. There needs to be a continuous supply of fuel, food, ammunition, and other necessities to keep the operation going. And this is where the U.S. gains an even greater advantage. Because of the size of their resources, they can send supplies even if the operation is far away. They have aircraft for refueling in the air, ships that serve as mobile bases, and a system to ensure the flow of support is never interrupted. This means that even if the fight drags on, they can maintain the pressure. On Iran's side, the situation is more difficult. Because of the successive strikes, the roads, bases, and supply storage are being destroyed. When logistics are affected, movement doesn't just slow down. Sometimes it even comes to a halt. And when the supply is cut off, no matter how strong the remaining force is, it can't be used properly. As time goes by, Iran's movements become more and more limited. They need to conserve their remaining resources. They can't just use things recklessly. Every move needs to be carefully considered, but this is where they struggle even more. Because while they're conserving, the U.S. continues to use its power nonstop. The operations never stop. There's no pause. This creates a huge gap in the fight. Along with this, there's another effect. Iran loses its flexibility. Before, they could adjust depending on the situation. Now, because their resources are limited, their movements become more predictable. And when their movements are predictable, it's easier to target them. While this is happening, the U.S. is tightening its control even more. Not just in the air and sea, but also in the pace of the entire conflict. In this situation, it's no longer just a question of who is stronger. The question now is who can endure. Because in the end, a battle like this isn't won by a single big strike. It's won through continuous pressure until the enemy gets exhausted. And that's exactly what's happening now. As time goes by, it's not just Iran's capability that's being destroyed. They're also slowly running out of ways to continue the fight. And when it reaches that point, even if the fight isn't officially over on paper, it's clear where this is heading. As the situation worsens, there's another effect that's gradually being felt. It's the slowing down of the country's normal activities. It's not just the military that's affected, but also basic operations like transport, communication, and business. When this happens, it becomes harder for the government to control the situation inside the country. The flow of information becomes more chaotic and it's harder to solve internal problems, while there's also pressure from outside. And when you face problems both inside and outside at the same time, the whole system breaks down more quickly. You don't see it right away, but it gradually shows up as the struggle goes on. It doesn't mean that just because the Marines are there, the Special Forces no longer have a role. In fact, they'll become even more important in the next move. Iran's drones and fast boats in the Strait of Hormuz don't just operate on their own. They need orders from command and control sites, or C2, located on the coast. This means that if these sites are hit, coordination will be cut off and it will be difficult for them to carry out attacks. In a possible U.S. setup, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit will come in to take the ports, set up a perimeter, and control the coastline. At the same time, special forces like Delta Force, Navy SEALs, and Green Berets will use these locations as bases to enter the coastal areas and target the C2 sites. This is not a full invasion. The whole country is not the target. The approach is quick, direct, and focused only on specific targets. It's like surgical strikes where every move is precise and there's no wasted effort. Overall, there are really only two main targets when it comes to Iran. First are the nuclear assets that pose a military threat. Second is the Strait of Hormuz, which puts pressure on the world economy. If they lose one, their position weakens. If they lose both, they almost have nothing left. If that happens, Iran will lose its ability to negotiate from a position of strength. They will lose control of the situation and the government will become even weaker. Even if this isn't a full invasion, the operation is still not small. A lot of soldiers are still needed to hold areas while the operation continues. That means the scale is still large, even if the target is limited. At this point, the question is whether Iran is ready to fight for their remaining assets, or if they will choose to avoid a bigger conflict. On the other hand, is the U.S. ready for the risk of a possible escalation of the situation and its consequences? As time goes by, it becomes clearer that the fight is moving toward ground operations and direct confrontation. And if Iran continues to refuse, it may no longer be stopped. We will soon see how far this fight will really go.